when you talk about ratio, okay, it's either the numerator and the denominator are related or not. Pwedeng related, pwedeng hindi. Okay? Pero pag sinabi mong proportion, class, the proportion, the numerator is always part of the denominator. Again, the numerator, pag proportion ang hinahanap, or pag yung measurement is proportion, take note always that the numerator is part of the denominator. Okay? And when you say rate, pag sinabi mong rate, it is always measured with the unit of time. Okay? Again, pag sinabi mo ratio, okay, the numerator and denominator can either be related or not. Pag sinabi mong proportion, the numerator is always part of the denominator. And pag sinabi mong rate, okay, it is always measured with a unit of time. So let's review this one, class. This attack rate. Attack rate is the proportion of population that develops illness during outbreak. Okay, prevalence rate is a proportion of the population that has health condition at a point in time. And case fatality naman is a proportion of persons with disease who die from it. So if you notice, class, these three terms are called rate in terminologies, no? Attack rate, prevalence rate, and case fatality rate. But if you notice, the definition is proportion. They are proportions. So these three terms, class, are all measures or are measures of proportion. Okay, tinatawag silang they are not considered true rates. Okay, so pero epidemiologists or yung mga researchers, retain na lang nila yung terminology as rate. Okay, para wala ng confusion. Pero by definition, class, yung tatlong ito, they are considered as proportion. Again, attack rate, prevalence rate, and case fatality rate are termed as rate. Okay? But by definition, they are proportion. Okay? So, niretain na lang yung term na rate para mawala na yung confusions and para hindi na mahirapan. Okay? For the sake of terminologies na lang. Okay? So again, if you have encountered these terms sa inyong mga readings, they are not true rates, or they are not considered as true rates, but by definition, they are proportion. Okay? Diba ang rate, definition natin ng rate, they should be measured with the unit of time. Itong tatlong ito, wala silang measurement of time. Okay? So all of them are proportion. Okay, tandaan na. So let's define or let's differentiate what is morbidity and what is mortality. So by the way, pag sinabi mong morbidity, they are proportion of illness in a population. Pag sinabi mong morbidity, class, morbid, illness, disease, or disability. Yan yung definition ng morbidity. So, ibig sabihin, buhay pa ang patient or buhay pa yung individual. If you notice, may wave pa yung kanyang cardiac output, no? Pag sinabi mo namang mortality, class, naka-flatline na. Ibig sabihin, the patient is already dead. Okay, incidence of deaths in a population. Ilan yung mga namatay. Okay, so do not be confused, class, no? So ito yung usual na confusion sa mga terminologies. Pag sinabi mong morbidity, disease. Pag sinabi mong mortality, death. Ang ibig sabihin yan. Okay? So now let's go to the different conditions. Or ito yung mga conditions wherein the measurement of risk is being used. Okay, so ano ba yung mga conditions? We have morbidity, mortality, and natality. So we have already discussed morbidity and mortality, no? Natality naman, on the other hand, class, is birth. Okay, birth rate. Okay, ito yung usual birth rate, birth proportion, birth ratio. Pero by the way, no, walang measurement na ratio and proportion sa natality. Only rate, birth rate lang. Okay, so ano bang mini-measure for morbidity? Sa ratio, we have risk ratio, rate ratio, odds ratio, period prevalence. For proportion, we have attack rate, secondary attack rate, point prevalence, and attributable proportion. So we're going to discuss this individually later on. And person time incidence rate. Okay, So ito din, i-discuss natin ito later on. For mortality naman, we have death to case ratio. Okay, Behrano present. Okay. And then proportionate mortality. So I think we have already discussed this one sa mga previous topics natin, no? Because death to case ratio is the most common ratio used in epidemiology. And for proportion, we have proportionate mortality. Diba? You are going to proportionate the death in a certain period of time in a certain population. Okay? For the rate for mortality class, we have various crude mortality, case fatality, cause-specific mortality, age-specific mortality, maternal mortality, and infant mortality. So pag sinabi mong crude mortality class, so by the way, no, crude is always used as term for epidemiological na mga matters, no? Pag sinabi mong crude class, it is total number. Okay? So pag sinabi mong crude mortality, the total mortality rate in a given population. Kaya nga, di ba, merong specific and may crude. Specific is individual reasons or cause ng death. Okay? Pag sinabi mong crude naman, the entire death, regardless of the reason. Okay? Okay. So, I will save again your usernames today for this one. Kasi 25 na tayo, you know. So, this will serve as your attendance for today's activity. Okay? So, now let's go to natality. So, natality ng class is considered or also termed as birth or birth rate. Pag sinabing natality class, so meron lang, wala siyang ratio, wala siyang proportion, but natality is measured using rate. Kaya nga may crude birth rate or crude fertility rate. Okay. Fertility rate class, so later on, mag-discuss naman natin dyan. Pag sinabi mong fertility rate is the age of a female, measurement of age, the number of female who are able to give birth. I think the fertility age for female is 16 to 40 to 45. Okay, that's the average number or the average age for fertility age for women. Okay, so it's also a measure of fertility. Pero pag sinabing fertility class, measurement lang ng pagiging fertile or capability ng babae na makapanganak. Pag sinabi mong crude birth rate is the actual giving birth of a child. Okay? So later on, we're going to discuss this. I think natality is our last topic for the finals. Okay? So isa-isayin natin sila. So ano ba ang components ng measurement ng risk? So first, we have morbidity. So di ba we have already discussed morbidity is something considered or also termed as illness or disease. Morbidity has been defined as any departure, subjective or objective, from the state of physiological or psychological well-being. Okay? From being healthy, okay, nag-depart ka. Ibig sabihin, nagkasakit ka. Okay? It's either disease, nagkasakit, injury, okay, or disability. So all three terms na yan, class, they are considered as morbidity. Okay? In addition, although for this lesson, the term refers to the number of persons who are ill, it can also be used to describe the periods of illness that these persons experience or the duration of these illnesses. Okay? Ilan yung nagkasakit and gaano katagal nagkasakit yung taong yon. So, lahat yon encompasses the morbidity frequency measure. Yun yung mini-measure natin sa morbidity. Ilan ang nagkasakit at gaano katagal sila nagkasakit. Okay? So measures of morbidity frequency characterize the number of person in the population. Okay? First of all, you are going to determine kung ilan yung number of people in the population. And then, ilan yung nagkasakit for a certain period of time, and the total number of people who are ill. Okay? So the new cases of people who are ill, that is considered as incidence. And the total number of people in a certain population who are ill is considered as prevalence. Okay? So tingnan niyo itong picture sa gilid, class. So this is a deliveries involving severe maternal morbidity from 2006 and comparable to 2015. So if you notice, In 2006, also Black women are involved in severe maternal morbidity. And in 2015, mas tumaas siya. Okay? So ano ba ang connection or ano ba ang reasons kung bakit nagkakaroon ng maternal morbidity? Okay, it's either diet, prenatal na mga activities. For example, wala siyang check-up. Okay? Hindi siya nag-undergo ng check-up ever since na nabuntis siya, and then diretso siya sa delivery. So hindi nila alam na may complications, either meron bang problem sa child or sa mother. Usually class, this is ongoing problems of those people na hindi maganda yung economy. Walang healthcare, walang maternal program, ang kanilang health system, or hindi maganda ang kanilang projects for health sa mga mothers. So, nahuhulog siya sa maternal morbidity, and eventually, class, it falls into maternal mortality. Okay, so it's either before giving birth, okay, during birth or after birth. Diba? Alam niyo yung post-maternity na mga depression, okay, it is usually hormonal, no? So, naagapan sana yan if proper yung medication and proper check-ups. Okay, proper yung management ng mother before and during and after the delivery of the baby. Okay, so yun yung usual na nagiging problem or nahuhulog siya into maternal morbidity. Okay, so that's morbidity frequency. So let's go to the different types of measurements for morbidity. We have incidence proportion, secondary attack rate, incidence rate, point prevalence, and period prevalence. So if you notice, class, the numerator are the same. Okay, so nakita nyo, pareho lang lahat ng numerator. New cases in a specific population in a specific period of time. But nagkakaiba lang sa denominator. For incidence proportion, the denominator is the population at the start of the time interval. For secondary attack rate, the total number of contacts. For incidence rate, the sum person years of observation. For point prevalence, we have same specified point of time. And for period, we have average or mid-interval population. So we're going to discuss this individually later on. Okay, so first, we have measurement of morbidity. Okay, so meron tayong dalawang klase nito, no? We have incidence and prevalence. So what is incidence, class? Incidence is new cases. Okay, occurrence of new cases of disease or injury in a population. Bagong nagkasakit, bagong number of people in a specific population. Although some epidemiologists use incidence to mean the number of new cases in the community. So yung mga bagong kaso ng sakit. Again, incidence is new cases or new occurrence of disease. So we have two types of incidence. We have incidence proportion and incidence rate. So by the way, no, if you notice itong picture sa gilid, by definition, class, ito yung differentiation ng incidence to prevalence. Si incidence, class, is the new cases in the population. Si prevalence naman, accumulated number of incidents in a population. Okay, nakuha niyo ba? Ano ang difference ni incidence and ni prevalence? Si incidence, yung mga bagong kaso. For example, daily may bago. Si prevalence naman, accumulated number. For example, in a month, in a year, yan. So we have two types of incidents. We have incidence proportion and incidence rate. So if you notice, sa term pa lang na ginamit, di ba? Incidence rate and incidence proportion. So what is incidence rate? Wait lang. Okay, so incidence rate, so nauna sa incidence proportion. No? Incidence proportion is the proportion of initially disease-free population that develops disease, becomes injured, or dies. So during a specified, usually limited period of time, so synonym for incidence proportion is the attack rate. Diba? We have mentioned kanina yung attack rate, no? So usually ang synonym niya or these terms are used interchangeably. So it's either incidence proportion or in our attack rate. So they are both the same. So probability of getting the disease, probability. So in accumulative incidence proportion is a proportion because the person in the numerator is part of the population who or the entire population. Yung numerator is the new disease or the new person who developed the disease, part siya ng population. So kaya siya proportion. So ano ang difference nito? Okay, so if you notice, yung formula for incidence proportion, the number of new cases in a specified period of time over the size of the population from the start of the period. Okay, so anong pagkakaiba nito from incidence rate? Okay, so later on we'll discuss that one. So take for example itong example natin from yung previous natin na topic. Okay, so same pa rin yung diabetes, no? So we have from the study of diabetics, we have 100 out of 189 diabetic men died after the 13-year follow-up. So yung period of time ng study nila is 13 years. Okay? From the time na first sila nag-count, okay, after 13 years, binalikan nila yung 189 people. So yung out of 189 diabetic man, after 13 years, 100 of them are died. Okay? So numerator mo is 100. Okay? And their denominator is 189. And then your n or your itong value nitong n is 2. So that's why 100 ang binigay. So later on, I think sa next topic natin, mayroong table doon kung ano yung ginagamit na n per problem. Okay, it's either 100, may 1,000, mayroong 10,000, and mayroong 100,000. Okay, so if we compute the risk for incidence proportion, we have 100 deaths over 189 for the number of population times 100 is equivalent to 52.9. Ibig sabihin, we have 52.9% of the total number of diabetic men died after 13 years of follow-up. Okay, so another example is this one. So this is called a food-specific attack rate. So out of 99 people or persons who ate potato salad, 30 of them developed gastroenteritis. So your numerator is 30, your denominator is 99. So still your n is 2. So 10 squared is equivalent to 100. So your food-specific attack rate is 30 divided by 99 times 100. So it gives you 30.3%. So 30.3% of people who eat potato salad develop gastroenteritis. So meron tayong specific na attack rate class, no? Or meron tayong specific na term only for food related na mga attack rates. It's either food poisoning, gastroenteritis, diarrhea caused by food, or amoebiasis. Diba? Lahat na related sa food. Okay? So that's called food-specific attack rate. So we're going to discuss it later on, yung individual types of attack rate. So what are the different properties of incidence proportion? So incidence proportion class is measures of the risk of disease or probability of developing a disease during a specified period of time. Okay, so as a measure of incidence, it includes only few cases of disease in the numerator. Ibig sabihin, bakit siya ginagamit as numerator? Because the new number of people who've developed the disease, siya yung mini-measure natin. Okay, so that's your numerator. And your denominator is the total number of people. Okay, so if you notice, new incidence, numerator, and the total number of people, denominator. Okay, so next, so we have an example of attack rate. Okay, so very useful si attack rate class during an outbreak. Okay. So in an outbreak setting, the term attack rate is often used as synonym for risk. It is the risk of getting the disease during a specified period of such as duration of outbreaks, and a variety of attack rates can be calculated. So katulad ngayon class, we are experiencing a global outbreak, di ba, pandemic. So very useful si attack rate. Okay? Pero ang attack rate kasi, ang term kasi na outbreak class, for a short period of time yan. Pag nag-exceed siya doon sa boundaries of outbreak, nagiging pandemic na yung term. Same as what we are experiencing right now. Di ba? So overall attack rate is a total number of new cases divided by the total number of the population. Ito na yung class, yung food-specific attack rate. It is a number of persons who ate the specified food and became ill divided by the number of persons who ate the food. So if you notice class, kaya nga siya term food-specific because this particular incident is related to food. Okay? And then lastly, we have secondary attack rate. Okay. Ano ang kaiba ng outbreak from pandemic? Outbreak class is a specific period of time. For example, in 1 year, merong outbreak. Okay? It will last for example, 1 week, then months. And then, it is usually a closed environment. For example, may outbreak ng polio in General Santos. So it's only in Gensan. Di ba? Pero pag lumabas na yan at nag-spread na yan, for example, in entire Philippines and generally, entire world, pandemic ng tawag dyan. For example, if sa Philippines lang, pwede pa siyang tawaging epidemic. Diba? Outbreak in a specific area. Okay. For example, China, di ba? COVID-19 started in Wuhan, China. Di ba? In that specific area, pwede pa siyang tawaging, on that specific period of time, nung nag-start yung pandemic, pwede pa siyang tawaging outbreak. Okay. Pero nung lumabas na siya from Wuhan and infected the entire China, tinatawag na siyang epidemic. Pero once na lumabas na siya sa China and infected the entire world, that is now considered as pandemic. So that's the difference of the yung mga terms na yan. Okay? So, if you notice, we have secondary attack rate. So, secondary attack rate class is, for example, in General Santos, secondary attack rate by definition is sometimes calculated to document the difference between community transmission of illness versus transmission of illness in a household, a barracks, or a closed population. For example, yung infection or the outbreak started in General Santos. Okay? Doon talaga nag-start. Okay? And then infected most of the people in a specific area. Okay? The people who are initially infected, they are the primary or the primary attack rate or the measured number of attack rate doon sa first na na-infect, tinatawag yung attack rate. Okay. And then, pag lumabas yung isang tao na infected sa isang area and then lumipat siya sa isang area and nakahawa siya ng ibang tao, those people na nahawaan niya, those are called a secondary attack rate. Intindihan? An attack rate are the initial people who are infected primarily. So, tinatawag yung attack rate. Pag lumabas yung isa doon, and then nakahawak siya ng ibang tao in another population, those people na infected in the new population, they are called secondary attack rate. Okay. So, very timely itong topic natin class, no? Kasi, di ba, yung contact tracing natin ngayon, the measurement of attack rate and secondary attack rate are made possible because of those types of tracing. Okay, sino yung nahawa, sino yung sunod na nakahawa, sino yung na-encounter nila, at sino yung nagkasakit. So, ganun ka-effective yung tinatawag nating attack rates na ito. So, if you notice, I think this picture ka, so take, punta tayo dito sa picture na sa side na class, no? So this is secondary attack rates by pre-exposure vaccination status in West Pakistan. I think this is smallpox attack rate. So initially class, before the vaccination, kumalat yung smallpox. Okay, maraming na-infect. And then, gumaling. Okay? So, they have already developed the vaccine. So, and then, initially class, merong mga tao na hindi nagpa-vaccinate. Okay? So, 27 people never been vaccinated with smallpox. So, there are also people na vaccinated for the duration of 10 years. So, 115 sila. And then people more than 10 years nang vaccinated ng smallpox. So for those people na hindi na vaccinate class, 26 out of 27 nagkaroon ng smallpox. Okay. So for those people na hindi nagkaroon or na-vaccinate within the period of 10 years, 5 of them are nagkaroon ng a secondary attack. And then for those people na more than 10 years na yung vaccinations nila, merong 8 out of 65. So if you notice, ganun ka-effective yung vaccination. So 96% of the people who never been vaccinated develop the disease or the illness, which is smallpox. And if you notice, konti lang yung percentage of the people na na-vaccinate and na-develop ng infection. So ganun ka-importante ang vaccination when it comes to secondary attacks. Kaya nga class, di ba, yun yung hinihintay natin ngayon, yung vaccination for COVID-19, di ba? Kaya nga, pag wala pa yung vaccines, people are encouraged to stay at home. Kasi nga, it will develop infection or mass infection. Okay? Or yung tinatawag nilang second wave. Okay, di ba? A second wave of people, a second wave of infection for those people na from the start, nasa bahay lang, dapat lumabas. Okay, kasi wala pang vaccine, so kailangan natin magstay sa bahay. So yun yung tinatawag natin secondary attack rate. Okay? Okay, wait lang mabagal lang. Transition ng slides natin. Okay, so calculation of incidence rate. So incidence rate class or the person time rate is a measure of incidence that incorporates a time directly into the denominator. So a person time rate is generally calculated from a long-term cohort follow-up study wherein enrollees are followed over time and occurrence of new cases of disease is documented. Okay, so typically each person is observed from an established starting time until one of the 4 endpoints is reached. Okay, onset of disease, death, or migration. So incidence rate naman class, so if sa term pa lang, incidence rate, measured siya with time. Okay, so kung kanina, the number of people in the population yung denominator, sa incidence rate naman class, yung denominator na is the duration of time. The duration of time people is part of the study. Okay, naintindihan? Take note of the formula, no? The numerator, the number of cases, and the denominator naman is the time each people is part or observed in, or the time each person was observed totaled for all persons. So ano ba ang relationship nito with incidence proportion? So if we calculate it, or if we compare those two class, similar to incidence proportion, the numerator is incidence rate, but the denominator is different. The total time of population was the risk and the being watched for the disease. So by the way class, incidence rate is also known as incidence density. Tandaan na, si incidence proportion, tinatawag siyang attack rate, di ba? Or also known as attack rate. Si incidence rate naman class, tinatawag din siyang incidence density. Meron siyang ibang term. Or I think it is also known as it is also known as person time rate. Okay, again, incidence rate is also known as person time rate or incidence density. So, paano ba kinakalculate si incidence rate? So, ito. So, we have, for example, we have a 5-year developing of disease. Okay. In a long-term follow-up study of morbidity, each study participant may be followed or observed for several years. Okay. For 5 years of development, we have different time for each individual or each participants. For example, may participant na natapos niya yung 5 years na follow-up. Meron namang participant na, for example, first year natapos niya, going to second year, hindi niya natapos or nawala siya papunta sa year 2. Okay, so pag ganyan yung case class, ina-assume ng researchers na yung half of the time or half of the period, many researchers assume that the person lost to follow up where an average is free for half a year and thus contribute 1/2 year to the denominator. Okay, 1/2 lang. Okay? Therefore, the person followed for 1 year before being lost to follow up contributes 1/2, 1.5 person years. Okay? So 1 year, kasi natapos niya man ng 1 year, di ba? Pero hindi niya natapos yung year 2. So ina-assume niya ang class na 1/2 lang yung natapos niya to calculate. Okay? Pag, for example, yung 1 year natapos niya ang follow-up. Pero on the second year, nawala na siya, hindi na siya na-follow up. So ina-assume ng mga researchers class na yung half of that year yung kanyang disease-free na follow-up. So ang contribution ng participant na yun is 1.5. Okay? So let's take for example itong incidence rate or person time rate sa gilid. Okay? For example, we have 5 participants. So first participant natapos niya this is a 10-year duration. Okay? 10-year duration na follow-up. Si person A, hanggang 8 years siya. Si person B, hanggang 9 years. Si person C, natapos niya hanggang 10 years. Si person D, 4 years. And si person E, 5 years. So, it means your total number of denominator or the person time rate mo is equivalent to 36. So, paano nakuha si 36? 8 plus 9 plus 10 plus 4 plus 5. Again, paano kinukuha yung denominator pag incidence rate or person time rate? Bibilangin mo kung ilang years or ilang time in years naging part yung isang participant sa follow-up or sa study. Okay, si person A, 8, si person B, 9, si person C, 10, si person D, 4, and si person E, 5. So, add mo lang silang lahat. So, that is your denominator for incidence rate. So, total incidence rate class is 36. Okay, let's assume na 4 out of them develop the illness. So, that's 4. So, 4 yung iyong number of people who've developed the illness. So, 4 divided by 36 times 1,000. For incidence rate class, this 1,000 is constant. Again, for incidence rate or person time rate, 1,000 in the formula is constant. So 4 divided by 36 times 1,000, that gives you 111.11 or 100, again, 111.11 per 1,000 person years. Or you can say it as 111.11 per 100 person per year. So that's how you compute for incidence rate or person time rate. So itong 0.5 na sinasabi dito class, for example, nawala. Ito kasi class, yung example natin, we have determined kung ilang years sila natapos. Itong 1/2 naman class, for example, yung 1/2 naman, ginagawa yan siya if nawala yung tao. Or hindi mo ma-determine, for example, you are on the second year, and then nawala siya. Hindi mo siya natapos. Ina-assume na nila class na 1/2 of that year is part of your measurement. So, 2.5 ang kanyang measurement. For example lang ito kasi, determined nila na sa 8th year, nag-stop siya. Sa 9th year, nag-stop siya. Ganon. Sa follow-up siya. And then nag-stop. Yung 1/2 naman class, if papunta pa siya sa next year, pero hindi na siya makagilap, or nawala siya, or died, nag-migrate, yun yung mga reasons usually. Pero pag stable or sakto yung follow-up nila every year, so ito yung measurements nila. Okay? So nakuha yung incidence rate or the person rate or person time rate. Okay? Okay. So I think we should stop muna here, class, no? Kasi baka malate tayo sa activity natin sa lab. By the way, I am going to post an assignment for the lecturer. After this conference, again, I am going to post an assignment for the lecture. Ano ba yung assignment natin for the lecture? So, meron tayong 3 output supposed to be. So, gagawa kayo or mag-research kayo online of 3 different graph or charts. Okay, 1 for morbidity, 1 for mortality, and 1 for natality or birth. Graph about mortality, morbidity, and natality. Bahala kayo kung ang measure of risk niya is rate, ratio, or proportion. Okay? It doesn't matter. Basta 1 for morbidity, 1 for mortality, and 1 for natality. Okay? So that will comprise and then explain nyo yung chart na yun or yung graph na yun. Okay? So that will be your assignment for the lecture. Deadline yan will be on Tuesday next meeting. That is December 1. Okay? So, again, meron tayong assignment for lecture. Yes, I am going to post the instructions sa course ninyo sa lecture. Okay? Ito lang is for, ma-explain natin kung ano yung assignment. 3 charts yan. 1 for mortality, 1 for morbidity, 1 for natality. Kayo ang bahala kung ang chart na yan about rate, about proportion, or about ratio. Basta 1 for mortality, morbidity, and 1 for natality. And then you explain that chart. Okay, that is your assignment for the lecture. Okay, so do you have any questions so far before tayo mag-end ng ating conference for the laboratory? Or merong for clarification? Okay? Meron bang hindi naintindihan? So, meron na lang tayo, I think, 4 slides remaining before we end yung topic na to. And then tomorrow, meron tayong new topic. No? I think we will going to discuss the different concepts or measurements. Okay? Yung mga conditions kung bakit mini-measure. So, tomorrow we will going to discuss the different morbidity, mortality, and natality. So, your assignment for the next meeting will be your preparation for para sa topic natin tomorrow.
So this will be your
okay? Meron bang hindi naintindihan? Nakuha ba lahat, class?
So 28 lang tayo.
Okay.
Diba?
Pwede lagay sa isang word lang, sir? What do you mean? No. 3 outputs kasi yon. So, dapat isa-isa. So, by the way, mag-ano naman ako, magpo-post man ako ng instructions sa course ninyo. So, doon siya ipapasa. Okay? Okay, Mr. Season present. Yeah, naka-note na yan, Mr. Season. Okay?
Anong need na magpasa kung naka-answer?
So, 3 assignments yan. Similar assignments, yun lang. Different categories. 1 for morbidity, 1 for mortality, and 1 for natality. Okay. Search lang kayo online of the different graph or charts about those conditions. And then you explain. Okay? Kasi that's the preparation for the exam or the lab, exam natin. Because I think sa exam, I'm going to post different types of charts. And you will determine kung ano or what to explain, anong klaseng chart yun. Okay? So because from the course of our discussion dito sa finals, di ba? Lahat ng presentations natin on charts, on graph. So dapat alam nyo paano siya i-explain. Okay, so Mr. Delubio present. Okay, so again, I am going to save your username.
So, sinave ko na yung
Kasi
username,
33
yun
tayo.
Yun yung magiging
Additional. Okay? So I think do you have any, meron pa kayong tanong so far? Or naintindihan na ba lahat? Sino ito?
Okay.
Okay.
Sinong meron?
Sir, sa ratio good, kailangan ba related ang numerator? Ang relatedness ng ratio class, it's either boy or girl. Okay? Ganyan. Or magkaklase sila. Or magkapareho sila ng course. Ganun ang relationship ng ratio. Pero ang ratio class, the numerator, is pwedeng hindi part talaga ng denominator. Kasi pag part na siya ng denominator, that is already proportion. Okay? So for example, the ratio of girl and boy in a class. Diba? So related sila. Pero hindi part ng denominator sa numerator. Okay? Pero related sila kasi they belong in a class. Pero pag sinabi mong the ratio of boy in a class, okay, the proportion of boys in a class, that's proportion. Diba? Pero pag sinabi mong ratio of girl and boy in a class, that is a ratio. Nakuha niyo ba? Okay. Yun yung difference ng or relationship ng relatedness ng ratio or pwedeng yung relatedness ng or relatedness kasi class ng ratio is described as pareho sila ng item. For example, yung the ratio of boy to girl sa BSMT 2B. Magkaklase silang lahat, they are related, but ang hinahanap mo is the ratio of boys and girls. Pero they are related. Diba? Pero pag sinabi kong the proportion of boys in BSMT 2B, diba? The boys is part of the BSMT 2B. So that's proportion. Okay? Pwede din kasi the ratio of BSMT boys to the number of chairs in the canteen. Pwede ganun. So they are not related, di ba? So, pero ratio pa rin siya. So, yun yung sinasabi ko kanina na can be related or pwede hindi. Okay? So, nakuha na ba? I think we should end the conference, no? Kasi malilate tayo sa laboratory. Okay? So, thank you everyone and see you sa laboratory BSMT 2B Lab A. Okay? So, thank you everyone. See you sa